Those who thought larger cars were becoming a thing of the past didn't factor in how popular SUVs would become. While sales of small cars are forecast to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 3% between 2014 and 2030, sales of SUVs are expected to grow by 4.7% over this period. This is according to Euromonitor International. In studio with us to tell us more about the growing popularity of SUVs is Pravin Harinarayan, the sales director at Volvo Car South Africa. Pravin, thanks so much for your time. Very much appreciated. So this growth in SUVs, 4.7 between 2014 and 2030. Why?
Thanks, Jimmy. Definitely, we've seen it from a Volvo perspective that we can break it down to two major reasons. It's one, from a functionality perspective, it's actually a lifestyle car and also a life stage car, if we could call it that. What we've seen, the migration from our Volvo passenger cars to SUVs is the moment a young expectant couple learns of a baby coming on the way, the first, or maybe the second question they ask, the first one being, do we need a bigger house? And the second question, do we need a bigger car? So absolutely that. So functionality, size, for space, in terms of occupants. And from a lifestyle perspective, definitely we've seen, they say that mountain biking is the new golf of South Africa, and because of that, transporting equipment, bicycles, etc., we've seen consumers move from passenger cars onto SUVs.
So it's gone beyond the image now. You said it can be for practical purposes.
Absolutely. I think image possibly, I would say, is the last reason why they're doing that. But even if you look at the segment of SUVs, it's basically three segments: a smaller SUV, middle-sized SUV, or medium-sized SUV, and the larger SUVs. And from an image perspective, I'd say the larger SUVs is definitely doing that for consumers, but on functionality, yes, the small and medium-sized SUVs.
Are we seeing the same trends in terms of SUV buying or interest internationally and in South Africa?
Yes and no. Yes, in terms of emerging markets, on the Volvo side as well. China being our largest consumer market at the moment, overtaking the United States and Sweden. So emerging markets like China, Brazil, Russia, absolutely. But at the same time, in Europe, what we found is that taxation on SUVs has increased from an emissions tax perspective. So that's why at Volvo, we've gone for a smaller sized engine. So in our new cars, the XC90, which is a large SUV, we've gone with the 4-cylinder derivative, where the taxation is much lower.
First carbon taxes.
Absolutely. And then, for example, in a country like Japan, where space is an issue, then we're seeing the converse take place, where there's a larger demand for smaller vehicles. So
how competitive is the space? Because SUVs, different brands.
Oh, absolutely. It's very competitive, very aggressive, especially on the German manufacturer side. And there's lots of derivatives coming into those medium and smaller segments.
Yeah. And let's talk about the trend from female drivers liking SUVs versus males. I don't know, how's that coming about? So you can understand if they're expectant mothers and so forth. Is it just this life stage thing yet again?
Yes, what we have seen, and the data speaks for itself, generally in our database, the wife is the home executive, as they call themselves these days, and of course they are transporting kids around, to school and activities, etc. And they definitely require a larger SUV, and even up to a 7-seater. And again, it's not only about occupants, but as well as sporting equipment like talk bags, cricket bats, etc., that they have to cart around. So that, yes, definitely is why women are probably driving it more than males do.
When Volvo is busy putting their projections, putting a certain car to the market, when they start pricing, what price range do they start at? Well,
we basically have two segments within the SUV, a medium-sized SUV and the larger SUV. Our XC60, which is a medium 5-seater SUV, starts off at around 550,000 rands. But at the same time, you also get a front-wheel drive or a two-wheel drive configuration, as well as the all-wheel drive configuration. So we start off with a front-wheel drive, which is around 550, and on the larger SUV, which is the XC90, it starts off at 800,000 Rand going to over $1 million. So
sounds a bit pricey, this tough economic environment that we're in. Are you expecting sales to decline? What are you doing to factor this in? Well,
the funniest thing is within the SUV segment and the larger SUV segment, that segment from a consumer perspective is quite resilient.
Okay.
Yeah, especially when I call it noise of the economy, like fuel price, interest rate hikes, etc. We don't see that segment fluctuate as much as the lower LSM segment. So no, and what we've seen is that cars priced over R1 million are selling even more. So strange, but that's the South African economy for you, yes.
Okay, and just globally, that's also the trend in terms of people wanting to buy cars. That's still...
Yes, definitely.
All right. Pravin, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Very much appreciated. Telling us about SUVs. There we go. That was Pravin Harinarayan. He's the sales director at Volvo Car South Africa.